Of all human functions, sleep is probably one that's associated with the most controversy, because there are no universal agreement as to why we sleep.
Hello and welcome to the Science or Fiction podcast Neuroscience edition. In this special series, we will interview experts to separate the science from the fiction in headlines and media coverage of neuroscience research. I'm Chloe Carrick, a PhD researcher at King's College London in adolescent brain development.
And I'm Dr. Catherine Bates. I'm a Youth Development and Mental Health Research Fellow, also at King's, and this is the Science or Fiction podcast. So, Chloe, how did you sleep last night?
I actually slept well.
Okay.
I'm usually not a very good sleeper, but last night for some reason I did actually sleep very well. I think it helps because I'm in a very quiet environment. So I'm living in Oslo at the minute and I'm on a very quiet street. So it's nice. That definitely helps.
Very different to London vibes.
Yes, there's no like screaming foxes.
Yeah, that is a big problem in London.
I know, I said that to people at work here and they didn't understand that there were screaming foxes in London. I was like, yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, they don't have that problem there.
How did you sleep?
So I feel like I'm sleeping a bit better, but I don't know if it's like psychosomatic because I've been trying to like read before I go to sleep instead of look at my phone, like look at TikTok, which is what I would usually fall into a hole of. But I'm really interested to find out today, like how sleep does actually affect the brain and whether I do need to worry about trying to sleep better.
No, totally. Yeah. And I think there's definitely like differences between us as well, right? Like everyone has a different way of sleeping or different things that work for them when they want to fall asleep. And I feel like in the media, it's often portrayed as like, here are the 8 golden rules that you have to follow to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And they're very important. But yeah, it'll be interesting to chat to our expert today to see what the evidence is saying.
Yeah, because I need loads of sleep and I feel sometimes shame around that because like I don't know, there's pressure to just, be up early and get on with the day and be productive, but like maybe some people don't need as much sleep, but we can find out why that might be. Should we get a guest in?
Yes, let's do it. So today we are talking about sleep. What happens in the brain while we sleep? Why is sleep important? And why do some people seem to need more than others? To help us answer these questions, we're very excited to welcome Professor Anders Fjell, a sleep expert and professor of cognitive psychology at the University of Oslo in Norway.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Great to be able to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Maybe to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to the position that you have now?
Yeah, so what I've been doing is studying how the brain and our cognitive functions develop and change through life. In that research, we're interested in looking at many factors that could potentially affect these relationships. And that's how I got into sleep, because we were looking at some measures of sleep and found that, okay, this may be interesting to help us understand how we develop and how we change in aging. And so I'm not originally a sleep researcher, but was forced to go into that as one of many interesting variables, and that has been quite enjoyable to look into, functions of sleep and consequences of sleep and what affects our sleep, because there's a lot of interest in that field.
We had a little chat with another sleep researcher as part of producing this episode, and they had said that there's no such thing as a sleep expert because there's still a lot of unanswered questions in why we sleep.
That's true.
So that, I guess, leads to our first question, which is, can you tell us a bit about what the evidence says about why we sleep?
Of all human functions, sleep is probably one that's associated with the most controversy, because there are no universal agreement as to why we sleep. And there are many theories, but no agreement among researchers. The most popular one maybe, and that's what you see in the media all the time, is that sleep is necessary for restoration, both for the brain and for the body. So we need to sleep because we need to kind of heal from the stress of being awake. So that's what ties this to brain health and optimal cognitive functions. A set of theories comes from evolutionary psychology, where we see that the sleep need across, for instance, animals and humans are very dependent on the circumstances. For instance, elephants who have the largest brain of all land-living animals, they can go without sleep for maybe 48 hours without any rebound
Really?
sleep if necessary. So seem to be regulated by the exact environment they're in.
You mentioned stress healing, and then also some evolutionary theories as well. Do you think it's possible that both theories are right, or there's a little bit of truth in both?
That's actually also something that is debated. Some argue that since we see sleep in all mammals and even smaller animals, there must be one primary function of sleep that goes through. Why would we otherwise see that? But others are arguing that even if that is true, it could be that during evolution, sleep has gotten more and more functions. Since we're sleeping anyway, maybe evolution has put more function into that. So I think maybe we also start to use sleep as restoration. It's claimed by some famous researchers that if sleep do not have a restorative function, then it must be a huge evolutionary mistake. But that also is quite questionable whether that is correct, because there are reasons why in evolution it's we should not move around. Our visual system is not very good. So running around when it's dark has very little benefit. We cannot feed, we cannot mate, we cannot do anything. So maybe it's better just to lay still and save energy. And energy saving is like a main driver of evolution. And then since we have this enormously curious central nervous system, humans are super curious. How do you keep such a system still, hiding in the dark? Maybe you just need to turn off consciousness in a sense. So this is very basic, and it's important to keep these aspects also in mind. And there's no evidence that animals are vulnerable while sleeping. They sleep in
Okay.
safe hiding places, and going from sleeping to be awake takes less than a second. So there is no reason to believe that this is like an evolutionary mistake, even if it doesn't have any restorative functions. That being said, if you usually sleep 7 hours, and then you start sleeping for a while, you feel horrible. And after a while, you cannot stay awake anymore. So there is something in us that forces us to sleep when we have gotten too little sleep. And animal research shows that in dogs, if you sleep deprive them and then take out their cerebrospinal fluid and put them into another dog, that dog will fall asleep. It definitely is something in us that really, really
Yeah.
pushes us to sleep.
It's interesting thinking about all the different reasons why it might have evolved. It evolved, for one thing, it might not necessarily be the purpose that it's used for or that it's useful for anymore.
That absolutely
Yeah.
is a possibility. The problem with evolutionary theories is that they do not explain why sleep is not one thing. During the night, we have different phases. In the beginning, we have very light sleep, slight changes in brain activity, and it's very easy to wake up. And if you've woken up during these stages, you will often not have felt as slept even. That you can probably see that many people, or especially kids, we wake them up and they claim I was not asleep, while they looked very, very much asleep to everybody else. So these are the really light stages. And then they go into gradually into what's called the deep sleep or slow wave sleep. And in those stages, or in that stage, you see that the brain activity changes a lot. Basically, it goes down. The brain is much less active and uses less energy. And you see that the brain waves kind of synchronize into waves that you can see. And that's the sleep that's associated with most restoration, according to many theories. That's the stage is argued where the brain gets rid of waste it accumulates while awake. But then after some of this slow sleep, which young people maybe have like 1 to 2 hours every night, then they go into REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is what's often called dream sleep. And brain activity during dream sleep is almost similar to awake. The brain is fully awake. It's not connected to the outside world, but it's fully awake. And if you've woken up during that kind of sleep, you usually have some quite vivid, although bizarre dreams to report. And then the brain goes back into deep sleep and back and forth through the night. So why we have this cycling of the sleep stages is not so easy to explain.
You mentioned young people there when you were talking about the different stages and how long people might spend in each stage. And we wanted to ask, why do some people need more sleep than others? Like, I feel like I'm someone that needs like at least 8 or 9 hours, but I feel a lot of people don't need that amount of sleep. And in terms of young people, like there is evidence to show that children and young people do need more sleep. But why are there these differences? Why does sleep vary between cultures, sex, gender, age? What influences that?
Regarding individual differences, there obviously is a lot of genetics involved in that. So some people genetically need more sleep than others, but exactly why we don't know. One variable that seems to regulate a lot how well people are functioning with less sleep is how, in general, aroused you are. People that get easily aroused can be easily worried or easily excited. They seem to be able to sleep much less, still function very well. That's like one variable. But there obviously are many more others, and we don't really know exactly what they are. But we know that, as you mentioned, the differences between sleep, for instance, in age, older people have less deep sleep than younger people. And also here, there's controversy. One theory is that this is because they don't need as much deep sleep as young people. Maybe because the brain is changing less, it's less plastic, they experience less new things, they learn less things, and all of this makes the brain not needing as much of this really deep restorative sleep. So that's one theory. Another theory is that they just lack the ability, that they actually need it, but they are not able to sleep that much anymore because something has happened in the brain with age. But there definitely is a reduction in how much deep sleep older people have compared to young people.
And I was just thinking as well about sex differences, because that's something that we see quite a lot in the media, is that, I don't know, you'll see a headline like women need more sleep than men. There's a lot of talk about that, and I wondered, could you speak a little to that as well, like potential sex differences in sleep needs, or whether there's any evidence?
There is evidence that women sleep a little bit more than men, maybe 20 minutes more on a regular day, something like that. What are the reasons for that? We don't really know. And is this sleep need or anything else? It's also hard to know. The problem with sleep need is that to define a need, you need also to define a function of sleep. How much do you need to sleep in order to fully restore, in order to be awake, in order to feel good, and all of these things. And also there's an inherent issue that just because we do something doesn't necessarily mean that we need to do it. For instance, it's obviously possible to sleep more than you need. We see that in animals and humans. You can get people to sleep more, and you can record no benefits of that extra sleep. They're not more awake, they're not more alert, they're not cognitively functioning better. The most extreme examples you see in animals, animals in the wild versus animals in a zoo. The animals in a zoo sleep maybe the double amount. And there's no reason to believe that that improves their cognition in any way. So they probably sleep out of boredom or lack of possibilities for exploration. People often drink more than they need and eat more than they need. There's no nutritional value in eating more than a certain amount, but people still like to do it. And the same way with sleep. Many people like to sleep. It's pleasant, and they sleep longer in weekends, not necessarily because they need the more sleep, but because they like the more sleep. And that's perfectly fine. But the thing I'm trying to get at is that you cannot infer from how much people sleep, how much sleep they actually need.
Okay, that makes sense. So sometimes there might be certain groups that sleep more, but it doesn't necessarily translate into a benefit. I was thinking about some of the things that we've learned like through this podcast. One thing is that women tend to be more messy because of hormone cycles. So like something that came up in a neuroscience episode was that like female mice are often not studied in neuroscience because it's too complicated because of hormones. So I wonder if there's like hormones involved, or women, for example, are more likely to experience chronic pain. I wonder if that plays a role. But that, I guess my question is, or it sounds like there can be kind of environmental influences on how you speak. So it might be cultural differences between experiences, it might be biological differences, it might be genetic, could be a combination of all of that.
Absolutely truth in that statement that much research has avoided females, even mouse, because of hormonal cycles. But they often disregarded also men have these things. There's huge fluctuations in male hormones too. Regarding sleep, yes, definitely there are influences from genetics, from your own body, and from the external environment. There was a paper a few weeks ago that had looked at the relationship between sleep duration and health. And they did this across a lot of countries. And what they found was that the sleep duration that was associated with the optimal health varied across countries, and it aligned pretty well with the societal view in that country on the importance of sleep. So like in some Eastern Asian countries, sleep is regarded as less important than in some Western countries, and also the ideal sleep duration, like the societal perception of ideal sleep, is shorter. And in those countries, they found that the sleep duration associated with the best health was shorter than in other countries. So this followed a quite nice pattern. Importantly, there's no causality involved here. We also study how does the brain look like in the people who sleep different times. And we find that about 7 hours of sleep is associated with all kind of good outcomes when it comes to cognition, comes to brain. It's also the same for mortality risk, cardiovascular health, and so forth. This does not mean that 7 hours is the optimal sleep duration. If there's any causality, it means that healthy people sleep about 7 hours. So there's no recommendation why you should sleep 7 hours. It's just like an observation that we see. And then the interesting thing is, to answer your question, is that this kind of sweet spot of sleep duration varies across countries. And probably not due to genetics, not due to biology, but due to the society's view on sleep duration.
We actually read that paper, or we saw, and I think it was covered in the news, and some news article that, we had read that how much people in this country will sleep on average will align with perceptions about what is a good night's sleep in that country. It's really interesting to think about all the different factors that could impact what is the average sleep somewhere, that aren't just about, that innate kind of like gold standard sleep need that we tend to see in the media.
We did then a little study where we asked people all over the world, mostly in Europe, but we had almost 28,000 people answering questions about brain health, what they thought was important and what they would do and so forth. And 85% rated sleep as important or very important for brain health. So it's like very pervasive that people believe this is super important. It was more important than many established risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, for instance. Much more important than alcohol, for instance. So people believe this. And I think there's a very obvious reason for that. And that's that if you don't sleep as much as you would like to, you feel horrible often. So if you go from sleeping 8 hours, as you mentioned, to sleeping 6 or 5 a couple of days in a row, you don't feel good. You feel your head is, foggy and, then you infer, of course, okay, I need more sleep. Sleep is not good for my brain, that I'm not sleeping enough.
We were going to ask about that as well. Maybe we could touch on it a bit more now, is that we have, looked at your recent review that came out this year about how are sleep patterns related to brain health. And just as you said, it seems like there's this public perception that sleep is very important for the health of the brain. But you touched on that a bit, and maybe you could explain a bit more about what does the evidence say in terms of whether there's that causal link or not between sleep and brain health?
Yeah, it's very hard to establish that. One reason is that causality, can go both ways. So although sleep could impact the brain, it's obvious also that things that are changing in the brain impact sleep, because the brain is what produces sleep. So if the brain stops functioning, like in dementia, like Parkinson's disease, for instance, you obviously see effects on sleep too, and it's hard to decide what comes first. And also, if sleep has like a long-term effect on brain health, you need to study it over many, many, many years, which obviously makes it more difficult. And then you see that people with declining brain health may have changes in sleep patterns, but it's hard to decide what's what. So then what you can do is to do experiments where you, for instance, deprive people of sleep and then see how their brain or cognition is doing. The problem with almost all of those studies is that they are so, let's say, brutal. Go from normal sleep to no sleep, or almost no sleep in a very short time. And usually the amount of sleep they allow people in such studies are much shorter than what's realistic. Maybe you sleep only 4 hours for a week, or not at all for a couple of days. Nobody can function with that. And then you can measure all kinds of things in the brain. But it's a bad model, because most people agree that, let's say running, jogging, that's good for your health. So if you take a person who's never been running or do not do that regularly and let that person run 15 kilometers, everything is bad. The person will feel horrible, will have muscle soreness for a week. If you study, blood markers, you see inflammation response, you see a lot of shit. And you can just conclude that running is not good. That's how the sleep experiments are usually done. You go from something normal to something extreme and you measure a response. Obviously, you do that. So it's very hard. So the strongest evidence comes from animal research, but it's been very hard to show the same in humans. A main thing is that people feel terrible when they're not sleeping.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? That like it does make you feel so bad if you're not sleeping.
Yes, it's very interesting, and we don't really know why.
Mm.
Because if you just sleep deprive yourself a little bit over a while, let's say by 25%, going from 8 to 6 hours, then you start to get more and more sleepy and feel worse and worse. At least many people will do that. But what you're effectively doing is you remove the light sleep stages and you remove some of the REM sleep, the dream sleep, while the deep sleep is mostly conserved. You do most of your deep sleep during the first 4 hours of the night. And if you're sleep deprived, that sleep stage is preserved. We get more and more of that. And since all the theories about brain health are focusing on deep sleep, it just doesn't fit. We don't really know why, cutting out the easy or the superficial sleep and the REM sleep seems to have this effect.
Could there be something about like how habitual it is? Like if you sleep 8 hours for many years every day and then you change it like you said, like any habit that is like kind of behavioral that you try and break is really difficult to do, and sleep is probably the thing that we do the most habitually. Like is it like a behavioral response of like feeling worse because you're trying to like you're breaking a habit?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. The short answer is we don't really know. There's been so few studies. I think there are 4 or 5
Mm.
studies who tried to systematically reduce people's sleep, and they were from the late 70s, beginning of the 80s. All of those found that you could systematically reduce sleep without negative consequences as long as you did it in small steps, and they went on for a long time. But these were really small studies. They had like 8 participants and things like that. But they were very promising. For some reason, people stopped doing those studies. But I think what you're saying is
Mm.
very important. And one study that would be interesting is if somehow we could mask people's knowledge about their sleep. So if you slept for a very short time, or you slept bad because you woke up several times. Many people feel bad, but some of that probably also is due to the knowledge that you slept bad. I don't know how we would do such a study, but if we could, blind it, so you don't know. Okay, I don't know how I slept last night. I think that would be an interesting study.
I was going to say the self-fulfilling prophecy almost, to be like, I didn't sleep well last night, therefore I will feel terrible today. Rather than, it seems difficult to, how would one design a study to capture, the actual effects of not having a good night's sleep? I guess so much of it is tied up into, as we said, all these different factors like individual differences and then the environment and for example, what your country thinks a good night's sleep is. So it's like all these different factors influencing how you might feel after having a bad night of sleep. It's difficult to tease apart like the actual effect on brain or whether there is one.
Partly what I'm taking away from this is sleep is important, but also you can't have like a good night's sleep and then do loads of other things that are bad for you, like not exercise and drink loads of alcohol every day and all that kind of stuff. Like you have to like have all of them, like you have to balance it all out. Good night's sleep's not going to solve everything, basically.
No, definitely not. But there's one difference is some people have sleep problems. They struggle with that, and they cannot sleep, and they feel sleepy, and they have a big problem. And there's people who have physical reasons why they cannot sleep. They can have pain, they can have breathing problems, all that. That creates real problems for them. And so what we often are discussing in the public perception of sleep is the voluntary sleep. You can choose to sleep more or less. So many people, they report that I fall asleep when I go to bed and I wake up by my alarm clock. Now these people could sleep more or they could sleep less. But that's an interesting population. I think that's many people, because that's where the perception of how important sleep is comes into play.
You talked a little bit about that golden 7 hours as well. Do you think that still should be like a recommendation?
Absolutely
Okay.
not. I think people have different needs. They feel better or worse with more or less sleep. People like or like not their sleep, and many things. Also, this is based on observations, not causality. So I'm not in any way recommend people to sleep 7 hours. I recommend people to sleep so much that they feel rested. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should feel super alert and super happy when you wake up in the morning. So the first advice maybe is don't evaluate your sleep the first 15 minutes after you wake up. Get up, if you drink coffee, have your coffee, take a shower, do whatever, go to work, and then you can evaluate did I sleep enough. Because it will often appear to be very, very different than what it was the first 5 minutes of the day.
Don't judge it straight away after waking up. I think we can all relate to that.
And maybe we can all do a little experiment trying to test like how long is our optimal length of sleep. It might be different to what you expect.
Exactly. What creates alertness? It's not only sleep, it's also what you do during the day. So evaluate not only the night hours, but all of the day. If you have fun things to do, you probably don't need to sleep that much to feel good. If you have very boring things to do, things are a bit depressive, a lot of things are going on that you don't like so much, maybe you feel really bad if you don't sleep more.
I really relate to that. Like when you sleep badly before you go on holiday because you're getting up really early for a flight or something, you're like, oh, I'm fine. Like I've had 3 hours sleep and I feel great.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you to you. It was great to discuss with you. This is an interesting topic, so very happy to contribute.
I feel less guilty about not getting the
Good.
optimal amount of sleep.
Yeah,
I think
me
that's
too.
that's the most negative thing with all the sleep ethics that people
guilt.
are spreading. That people, yeah, exactly, they feel guilty, and it creates a lot of sleep problems for people. And the cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep, which is the main thing to offer people that don't have a specific problem, is to remove the stress from the sleep. Don't measure how much you sleep. Don't the worst thing is laying awake in bed, not being able to sleep and feel the night is going and I'm gonna be terrible. So relax, sleep, and take it easy.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode on sleep. Make sure you subscribe to the newsletter at scienceorfiction.co.uk to get our most recent episodes and updates about live events. Please rate and subscribe as well in your favourite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more people. If you've got a suggestion for a future topic, you can DM us on social media at Science or Fiction Podcast or email info@scienceorfiction.co.uk. This episode was produced by Chloe Carrick and Anushka D as part of the Neuroscience series. Thank you to the youth advisory groups for their input on this series as well. See you next time.